What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 27 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the New York Giants. Before we get started, if you could do a huge favor for me, please do hit that like button down below. This series is a major endeavor for me, and I'm not able to crank out the volume of content that I normally would. So it's really important to me that these videos continue to do well, and by you hitting that like button, it tells YouTube that you like the content to push it out to other NFL fans just like you. Would really appreciate it, would really help out my channel. So if you could just take a second to hit that like button down below. Also, if you enjoy, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss any of these deep dives as we count down to the number one team in my power rankings. But let's get into the New York Giants, who, here we go again, man, ranking in the bottom third of the league. Feels like just yesterday we were talking about Joe Judge coming in, new head coach. Well, it's a new regime, it's a new rebuild, retooling, whatever you want to call it, trying to establish some legitimacy in this new regime. Now, I will say I'm much more optimistic about this go around, coming off the Brian Daboll hiring here. We're going to talk a lot about this staff and what the new scheme is going to look like, but just to tease a little bit, I do think they got the best head coaching candidate in at least the last 2 years, if not 5. I'm a big fan of the Brian Daboll hiring. Also, I loved their draft, getting to me the player that I thought should have been the number one pick in Kayvon Thibodeau, and to me, the best player in this draft in Evan Neal. So definitely some excitement, a lot of interest in this team, and obviously a lot of stuff that they need to prove and figure out this year too. So it should be a fun one. We are going to start by talking about this team's offseason with Joe Schoen coming in, the new general manager. And I will say, with Joe Schoen stepping in, it's not easy for a general manager to come in January and make all the right moves. Like, you just don't have a lot of time before free agency, before the draft. You've got to get caught up on what all the existing scouts have worked on to that point. You have to quickly formulate your staff from a coaching staff perspective, and you've got to try and understand the culture within the players too, and like, who do you let go? Who's a locker room glue guy? It's just not easy, and I thought Joe Schoen did a really good job kind of navigating a difficult situation, both as we just described, as with any new GM stepping in, it's going to be tough, but also Dave Gettleman kind of left a giant mess here in New York, and it's not going to be a one-year rebuild for the Giants, but I like a lot of the moves they made, and I think they set themselves up for pretty clear development moving forward. The one thing I will say before we talk about the players that they're going to be letting go here is they did miss out on retaining Patrick Graham, their defensive coordinator, the last few years. I think he's been one of the lone bright spots on this Giants team, and I think the Raiders got a really good one of the more innovative minds with a very unique system that has worked. So I do think that's a bummer for the Giants, but they turn around and get Wink Martindale, who we'll talk about is a good bounce back, but he is not Patrick Graham in my opinion. But from a roster perspective, they are letting a lot of these pieces go. You start on the offense, you got to mention Devontae Booker, who did play 500 snaps, just, backup running back, but that is a role that they're going to have to replace. Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph, that tight end room has vanished. And then on the offensive line, losing significant snaps here, Nate Solder, that's addition by subtraction. Like, my God, I knew he was bad. But just revisiting this team again on all 22, maybe I just caught some of his bad games, but oh my God, like, thank goodness he is gone for the Giants. And thank goodness they're bringing in Evan Neal to replace him. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that. But Will Hernandez, who's been a starter here for years, he played over 1,000 snaps last year. He's gone. Matt Skura, more addition by subtraction, but you are going to have to find a starting guard there. Billy Price as well. Played surprisingly well last year, which is not saying much for what Billy Price has been in his career, but he was their starting center last year. So losing a lot of snaps on that O-line. Probably for the better, though. Then on the defense, they are losing some pretty good veterans here. Austin Johnson's a very capable defensive tackle, got a nice contract from the Chargers, an underrated player that is a loss. Lorenzo Carter, who we talked about for the Falcons deep dive, vacating starting reps on the edge there. Reggie Ragland, a thumping linebacker that played about half their snaps last season. Logan Ryan and James Bradbury as well on the back end. Some key starters who both played over 1,000 snaps last year, leaving a lot of doors open in the secondary. But then you go to the additions. You know, they did not add as much as they lost. I think they have some youth on this roster that they want to turn to, and they have some young players here in the draft that they're going to want to give opportunities to. So we've mentioned Evan Neal. He'll be stepping right in at right tackle. And then they signed Mark Glowinski to basically slide right in at right guard to upgrade Will Hernandez, doing an excellent job rebuilding this offensive line that's been such a disaster. It was their main focus this offseason, and I do love that they started up front with that O-line that Dave Gettleman did such a bad job with, and that includes bringing John Feliciano over from Buffalo following Brian Daboll here. He's going to compete on the interior. They draft Josh Iswedu out of North Carolina as well. He's going to compete. So this is very similar to the early Josh Allen days with Brian Daboll, with Joe Shane, both guys coming over from Buffalo, where they really threw a lot of resources at the O-line, and after a couple years it became a very respectable group after being one of the worst in the league. So almost a spitting image of what they did for the Bills, if not better, getting guys like Evan Neal and Glowinski, who are better than a lot of the pieces that the Bills were able to add. They also drafted Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round for some reason. That was the really one thing they did on this list that I was like, what the hell was that? We'll talk about Wan'Dale when we get into the roster here. They add a couple veteran tight ends, Jordan Akins, Ricky Seals-Jones, going to be competing for starting playing time. And then on the defense, not doing a whole lot, going to open the door for a lot of these young players, but Kayvon Thibodeau gets brought in here, as I mentioned, who I thought the Jags probably should have drafted number 1 overall, not Trayvon Walker, so a bit of a steal there in my opinion. And then you got to throw Blake Martinez on there as well, captain of their defense, returning, who missed the majority of last season due to injury. So a busy offseason. And let's get into the coach and scheme here, analyzing who these guys are and what types of systems we're going to see here in this new regime. So Brian Daboll, I mentioned, to me, the most qualified head coaching hire of the last at least 2 head coach hiring cycles, if not 5. Like, Brian Daboll checks every single box. You want to talk about getting an offensive head coach, which in my opinion is preferable to going with a defensive head coach, because the second-year offensive coordinator becomes, desirable head coaching candidate. He's gone and you're back to square one. Box checked. Brian Daboll is an offensive guy. You want to talk about being a good offensive guy with an excellent resume. Box checked. He has become the really textbook for what you're supposed to do for a young quarterback, both surrounding him with talent, but also schematically buy into what he does well. And they've done that for Josh Allen. He is going to be an adaptable, smart offensive mind, which is incredibly difficult to find in the NFL these days. I mean, the Giants had frickin' Jason Garrett calling plays last year. It doesn't get a whole lot different than going to Brian Daboll. You also want to talk about a guy that has experience, that's kind of learned and studied under some of the greatest minds, not just in football today, but ever. I mean, he's worked under Nick Saban in 2017. He worked under Bill Belichick in 2013, 2016. Josh McDaniels, another head coach in the league right now. He's worked under Sean McDermott, is a really just good culture guy as well. So he's going to be able to kind of pick and choose his favorite leadership traits of all these guys that he's witnessed firsthand. And I think he's not just going to be a great offensive mind, but he's going to be a great culture guy as well. And he understands how to work with players and build a culture. So you're getting a guy that's a culture potential stud and a offensive mind stud. Like, God, it really does not get much better than what Brian Daboll could potentially bring to the table here. So that is the most resounding piece of optimism for the Giants in this entire video, is you got Brian Daboll, and that is huge. And I like the Mike Kafka hiring a lot as well. A hot name ascending the last couple of years, really, as he's worked under Andy Reid. Just a backup quarterback like 6-7 years ago, but a fast ascending offensive mind. And I think pairing him with Brian Daboll makes the most sense in the world. Like, similar schemes, both very like spread heavy offenses over the last couple years. You look at Kansas City and Buffalo, from different sort of coaching trees, but a lot of shotgun, a lot of inside zone. But I think Kafka's also just going to bring a lot of fresh thinking to the table. You work under Andy Reid and you see all the crazy shit that they draw up on Sundays into the playbook. Like, it just inspires creativity. So especially when you talk about like red zone pass design, like fourth down passing design, they've done some really cool stuff in Kansas City. He's going to bring some of that over. The potential of that, like a young Andy Reid disciple working with Brian Daboll, is through the roof. And if this goes well, Kafka's probably going to be a head coach himself before too long. But as far as what this scheme is going to look like, Brian Daboll's calling the shots here. It's going to be his offense, not necessarily Mike Kafka's. Kafka's just there to offer insight. But Daboll is going to craft his offense to whatever he feels like his personnel can run the best. The last few years in Buffalo, it's been a ton of shotgun. It's been more of a kind of spread style offense, but he's really catered the playbook to Josh Allen, both adding quarterback runs into the mix that Josh Allen has been electric at, but also like a lot of just deep passing concepts, crossing routes, posts, two-way goes, stuff that really keys into Josh Allen's style and physical ability as a quarterback. Now coming to New York with, let's just face it, a less talented offensive group and Daniel Jones at quarterback, you might see him dial it back a little bit, go to more of a classic Josh McDaniels style offense where you're getting a lot of option routes, get the ball out quickly, more of that quick spread type of deal. You might see him go to more of a power run game here. He is going to adapt this offense to what he feels best, and that is the best ringing endorsement of an offensive mind, and I fully expect that to be the case here. And I'm excited to see kind of what they put out there as far as what this playbook looks like. Obviously, I'm optimistic about this group. I rank Brian Daboll 12th for overall head coaching, which for a first-year head coach, that's like stupid high. But on one hand, you have like 10 new head coaches this year, so that's a factor. But I also, again, I'm just super optimistic about what he's going to bring to the table and how qualified he is for this job. But pass game coaching, they rank 7th. Like, this to me is one of the more exciting combinations of offensive schemers, especially in the pass game. And man, like, how can you not be thrilled with this duo? From a run game coaching perspective, I think they leave a little bit more to prove, I suppose. I've never been impressed by the Bills' run game. I think the Chiefs, I don't look at their run game and I'm like, wow, it's coached up so well. They scheme up and mix up their runs and confuse defenses. No, these are two coaches coming from remarkably pass-heavy teams, and there is a pretty massive gap. I think that's probably the biggest gap we'll see as far as the difference between how good or how well I think they'll coach the pass game versus how well I think they'll coach the run game. And then you flip over to the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned they lost Patrick Graham, and I do think that's a loss, but I think they responded very well by attracting Don Wink Martindale in here. And Martindale was let go by the Ravens. I do believe that the Ravens really had their eye on, the McDaniel kid from Michigan. I say kid. But the defensive coordinator that stepped in Baltimore was in Baltimore before he was at Michigan. I really think they were like, we got to get this guy. Like, he's on our radar. We think he's a stud. And unfortunately, Martindale was kind of caught in the crossfire of that. And, you know, he lands a defensive coordinator job almost immediately. So I still think he's a very respectable hire and a good defensive mind here. Ranking 22nd for me, just a little bit lower than you might expect, because he's going to need to inherit a new staff, a Giants organization that's coming from behind. You're not going to be able to just hit the ground running exactly as he was in Baltimore, but I think he can definitely get back up to speed. So I like the hiring. As far as schematically what he's going to bring to the table, just that attacking 3-4 base sort of defense. As far as schematically what he's going to bring to the table, attacking 3-4 style defense, man. He's going to blitz. He's going to run press man coverage and get after it. He's going to run a lot of cover zero when he's able to. For year one with a younger secondary that he hasn't really handpicked, you might not run as much press man coverage, because I don't know if he thinks these guys can run it or not. I guess we'll find out. But at his core, learned under Rob Ryan, learned under Dean Pease, who we talked about for the Falcons, and the Ravens under Wink Martindale, other than last year when their entire defense got injured, and he did have a bit of a down year for good reason. They've been at the top of the league as far as cover zero and cover one rushing 5. Like, that's what he wants to do. He's going to get after it, ask these D-backs to get in the receivers' faces for 2-3 seconds and load that D-line with fast, blitzing linebackers, pocket-pushing edge guys, and again, just get after it. So that's what he wants to do. Year one, it could look a lot different. We could see a lot more zone, and less blitzes on cover one, that kind of stuff, just because he may or may not feel like this secondary can hold up. That's what we saw in Baltimore last year. As the corners got hurt, they weren't able to run as much zero blitz and cover one. So we'll keep an eye on that, but that is what he wants to do at the core. So now let's get into the roster breakdown here, the good stuff. We're going to start by talking about the passing game here. We're going to rank the run game, the flip over to the defensive side of the ball. We'll rank the pass defense, the run defense, and then we'll take a look at their Vegas over-under and my win total expectations before we bring in our excellent guest, Bengal, for this show. But let's talk about Daniel Jones. Actually ranking 22nd at quarterback for me, which I do think means I'm now a Daniel Jones truther. Never thought I'd reach this point, but the narrative on him is pretty wild. Like, he gets discussed in that group with like Sam Darnold, Tua, Drew Lock as just a wasted space quarterback. And I don't think that's Daniel Jones. I really don't. Year one was rough, and he surely showed that he was overdrafted with the 6th overall pick, like we all kind of knew he was. But year two, I thought he really had some commendable development when it comes to processing, decision-making, started to clean up his memeable fumbling issues. I had a running joke on Twitter for the first 20 starts of Daniel Jones' career of like, this week's Daniel Jones fumble of the week brought to you by insert pass rusher here. Like, it was a joke how much he was fumbling early on in his career, and he has not had those issues now on the second half of his career so far. Then you get to year 3, and he definitely took a step back, but so did literally everyone on this team. Coaches, defensive personnel, offensive personnel. It was a complete dumpster fire here in New York. And then he gets injured and misses the second half of the season. So definitely you don't want to see him take a step back. You wanted to see him take a step forward. But when you look at the state of this team, it was an impossible situation. Just watch the games after Daniel Jones got hurt, and you had some of the least efficient passing performances in the 21st century. Like, that goes to show you how bad this situation was with Jason Garrett calling plays, with this offensive line, with these receivers, and how much they were getting hurt. Games that even I couldn't even get through at the end of last season because it was just such a waste of time. Like, they were basically an XFL team out there. But anyway, I do believe Daniel Jones is a functional NFL quarterback. He is going to rank 22nd for me. I mentioned the development that he showed, particularly from year 1 to year 2. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. You can see a world where the processing grows and the decision-making grows, and he continues to take care of the football, and he gets better pass protection and better playmakers around him, to the point that maybe the Giants do hang around and they win 7 or 8 games this year, which would be an accomplishment. And they're sitting there after declining his 5th-year option, I think rightfully so. I'm not trying to go so far in the other direction to say that he's proved that he's a franchise quarterback here, but I can see a world where he gets a little bit better playing on time, with the accuracy, with the decision-making, and you're sitting there saying, look, he's like the 19th best quarterback in the league. We decline that 5th-year option. Let's see if we can get him to agree to the rare sort of mid-tier quarterback contract, right? Every quarterback in the league, for the most part, if you're a good starter or anything around that, when your contract's up, you're getting $40+ million. And I think it's the dumbest thing in the league. Like, Daniel Jones should not automatically get the same money as Patrick Mahomes just because he's the next quarterback to be up. He has leverage, of course. Someone else might want him. Maybe they wouldn't, though. We're in a league where Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo are readily available, who are similar quarterbacks to Daniel Jones. So maybe we're seeing that change a little bit. But let's say Daniel Jones looks a lot more like an improved version of his sophomore year here, and he's the 19th best quarterback, and you get him on a 3-year, $80 million contract. You can start to picture a world where that's a manageable deal. You continue to build a good roster around him, and you can function to the likes of Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, but on a cheaper contract. Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. Dare I go as far as saying Dak Prescott in this division? You can see a world where it gets to that with Daniel Jones. I don't think he has the physical tools to be much more than around the 16th best quarterback in the league, but I think I can see a path for that to happen. I don't watch Daniel Jones and I'm like, oh my God, he sucks. I do think he has redeemable qualities as a quarterback, and he gets a little bit of a bad rap. Now, all the hate for Daniel Jones definitely comes from somewhere. I think he's a very timid third down passer. Like, if you need a quarterback to make a play and break from the structure of the offense, use his instincts to make it happen on a difficult third down, he's not really probably ever going to be that guy. I don't think he has that natural pocket feel to navigate pressure and do some of those high-level things. So, again, a lot of that hate definitely comes from somewhere. So this is certainly like a best-case scenario that he's the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, and that means everything around him has to be perfect. So that's far from an ideal situation when you want to talk about what you want your quarterback room to look like. But I do think that him eventually potentially becoming QB 18 is a more optimistic projection than where the public discourse normally is with Daniel Jones. Now, that's like a best case scenario, right? And that maybe there's only 15% of the time that plays out. I think it's also equally likely, if not more likely, that he just doesn't have a good year and he makes mistakes, which he will do. Like, he's not Peyton Manning back there. Like, he's gonna make bad reads, he's gonna put the ball in harm's way. So if those signs of development aren't there and he remains the 23rd, 24th best quarterback in the league, then you decline that 5th-year option for a reason. You're probably picking in the top 5 to 10 of next year's draft, and you can move on from Daniel Jones. So they're not in a bad spot here. They're lucky that this quarterback class this year really sucked because they were able to get really good players and then kind of get a clear runway for Daniel Jones, decline that 5th-year option to make it just abundantly clear, like, it is now or never, Daniel. Like, this is the year, and you put a lot of pressure on him to hit the film room and take control. And I'm strangely excited to see what he can do and maybe prove some people wrong. And maybe I'm just overly optimistic on Daniel Jones and he really does just suck. But I think he's more of a Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield than he is a Drew Lock or a Sam Darnold, for example. Like, he's got a level of ability to read defenses and consistency to him. Enough time about Daniel Jones. It's obviously a major question for this team. You do have Tyrod Taylor behind him. Okay, good backup. It's not going to happen at this point for Tyrod Taylor, but it's good to know he's there. And that's really your quarterback depth there. But then you talk about the weapons here, and it's fine. They rank 25th. You have a lot of depth here, but no one that you're overly excited about. I'd like to be more optimistic about Kenny Golladay and say he can get back to what he was with Matthew Stafford. But God, he was one of the more underwhelming free agent signings of the last few years, not just last year. Gets top dollar. All of a sudden, he's a budget wide receiver with what we've seen these guys get paid this offseason. So at least that's good. But he had 500 yards and 0 touchdowns last year. Like, I don't care who's throwing you the ball. That's just not good. Had a hard time kind of staying healthy throughout the season, which is something that's plagued him in Detroit as well. So it could just be something that's catching up with him. And I don't really see Kenny Golladay ascending beyond being a good possession number 2 receiver. And even then, he wasn't that last year. So I've always liked Kenny Golladay, but I don't know how you can look at what he did last year and feel too good about him as your best wide receiver. If he was your number 2, you'd be maybe okay with it. But even then, it's like, God, he was so underwhelming last year. So you're hoping he can be somewhere between what he was in Detroit and what he was last year. But if he's anywhere close to last year, like, that's hardly a starting caliber receiver. Like, he wasn't winning those tough balls. He wasn't getting open. He wasn't staying healthy. It just was not good. You got Sterling Shepard, another guy that's had a hard time staying healthy. So that is factored in here. If these guys get back to full health, this ranking is going to be bad. It's going to be at, maybe the 15th or 16th best group of weapons. But it's hard to project that from these two guys right now. Sterling Shepard, I think, is best working over the middle of the field from the slot. Not that he can't play outside, but I do think he's a better receiver from the slot. Getting up there in age just has not been the same receiver the last couple of years as he was, say, 2 years ago when he did earn a big contract extension here. You're happy that he's there, but I would just say he's trending downwards, and you're not counting on him to be a reliable number 2. I think if he was a number 3, you'd feel pretty good. So if you had an alpha here, you could kind of push these guys down and feel better about this group. Darius Slayton's another good, number 2 perimeter player. Really struggled down the stretch last year. I think he has it in him to turn it around. Explosive deep threat, a good route runner, nice release off the line of scrimmage. Just a difficult guy to cover on slants because you have to respect him over the top. So I like Darius Slayton. You were underwhelmed by what you saw from him last year, just as you were by pretty much everybody here. So it's difficult to project too much from him. Also a little bit redundant with what Kenny Golladay brings to the table as that perimeter receiver, but mostly a solid third option there. Then you got last year's first round pick, Kadarius Toney. Obviously, Giants fans really hoping for a step up from him from what he was able to do last year. It was very injury related last year. Now you've got kind of trade rumors and a rap career and a lot of off-field stuff going on here. He's just kind of the ultimate question mark, honestly. Played a couple games and looked really explosive. Like, he went to town against the Dallas Cowboys and then hit the town and disappeared the rest of the year. His ability to move, especially with the ball in his hands, is unique. And in theory, with Brian Daboll calling plays with creative ways to get the ball in his hands, he could be an explosive playmaker here and show why he was a first-round pick. But seems to be some pretty major off-field concerns with him, and what you're going to get from him at this point in time, it's just up in the air and a massive question mark. So it's unfortunate that it's reached that point, but at this point in time, there's just not a lot of clarity on that situation. Then they draft Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round. Genuinely one of the 3 worst picks in the entire draft, in my opinion. I don't see a world where he returns top 50 value. He's not remarkably explosive. He's a good gadget player. Ironically, my comparison for him was Isaiah McKenzie. But the beauty of Isaiah McKenzie is you didn't have to draft him in the second round, right? Like, you don't need to do that. Obviously, Brian Daboll had McKenzie in Buffalo, and he was the gadget guy. Jet sweeps, bubble screens, line him up as a running back. You can do a lot of different weird creative stuff with him that confuses defenses. But again, overpaying for him. I don't see him being this major impact outside of being that gimmick gadget type of receiver. And honestly, I think ideally Kadarius Toney could have been that guy for you. So it's all just kind of an unfortunate situation, but he is there and he'll have that role. You will see him get 3 or 4 manufactured touches a week probably. You have Colin Johnson and really a lot of interesting veteran depth pieces here, honestly. Players I like as wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 types. Colin Johnson is literally your Kenny Golladay backup. If anything happens there, you get your big perimeter, go get it receiver. You have Richie James, who might actually be a better version of that gadget player than Wandale. And again, you don't know if Kadarius Toney's going to be there, so it makes sense why he's here as that sort of slot gadget player. CJ Board, Robert Foster, David Sills, all interesting receivers that are going to be duking it out for a wide receiver 7 opportunity here, but it just might be a little bit too crowded for those guys. But I do think they're capable wide receiver 6 types. So a ton of depth with this wide receiver room, just not an alpha and uber reliable players when you talk about Galladay's health, Sterling Shepard's health, and Kadarius Toney's off the field issues. You can see a world where this looks similar to last year, where it's Darius Slayton and Wandale Robinson and CJ Board. Like, hopefully it doesn't come to that, but that's a potential outcome when you want to talk about availability is the best ability. The tight end room really sucks as well, and that does drag down the weapon ranking just a little bit. You bring in Jordan Akins and Ricky Seals-Jones, 2 like tight end 2 types that are going to be competing for starting opportunities here. Both guys decent athletes, both guys a little bit undersized, neither good run blockers. Ideally, you get Daniel Bellinger, the 4th round pick that I really liked. Ideally, you can get him to develop, and I liked this pick quite a lot, so keep an eye on him to hopefully win that job. It's just not something you really expect in year 1. Tight end has a massive learning curve, so obviously Giants fans will be hoping for that, but I would not count on it. He's a really athletic guy. And you look at what Brian Daboll did with Dawson Knox, who was kind of brought along slowly as a backup until eventually earning that starting job by year 3. I think Daniel Bellinger is a very comparable prospect coming out, and they saw very much a similar prospect there. So, dynasty fantasy leagues, keep an eye on Daniel Bellinger down the road. But this year, I would not expect much of an impact from him, just as he wasn't an impact receiver in college, just an athletic guy that was underutilized in the passing game. Then you've got Chris Myrick, whatever, but Austin Allen, keep an eye on him as well, a 6'8" tight end out of Nebraska, who I thought obviously showed the stiffness that you expect from any 6'8" tight end, but moved better than he should at that size. Has good hands, used his massive body well as a blocker. A fascinating undrafted pickup. I actually liked a lot of the undrafted pickups that this Giants team had, so we'll keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the video. Then the running backs, it pains me to talk about Saquon Barkley in a different light than I have in years past. I just genuinely think the injuries, the beating he's taken has caught up to him. I do not watch Saquon Barkley and say, that's old Saquon. That's the guy that is the highest graded prospect I've ever had. Just a Greek god among Greek gods when you talk about him in his prime with the ball in his hands. Not anymore. I don't see that. He's still explosive. He can still run away from guys. He still has that route running prowess and pretty solid hands. He's far from a liability. Like, he's still a good receiving back, but I don't view Saquon Barkley in the same light as I used to, unfortunately. And I really hope he gets back to full health and can be old Saquon. But I just sadly think the last 2 regimes here have beaten him down, and I don't think he's the same guy. I do like what Matt Breida is going to bring to the table, and maybe he can relieve Saquon so that he doesn't get beat up and get injured, because I think he's pretty close as far as how much he can help in the receiving game. And Matt Breida himself needs a limited snap count, so maybe these guys can help each other in that way. But a good route runner, a guy that's just smooth after the catch, transitions into a runner really quickly, and has a lot of speed as well, can be schemed up on wheel routes and sneak into the second level and be a surprising vertical threat as a receiving back. So you do have some options there for sure. Brightwell, Antonio Williams, big Jashawn Corbin out of Florida State. None of these guys are going to give you too much in the receiving game, so it's much more about Saquon, Matt Breida, and you will see some Wan'Dale Robinson moved into the backfield as well in different packages, so you got to keep him in mind as a receiving back where he would be a bigger presence. He'd be more of like a 74, 75 grade as a receiving back. And then we've got the offensive line. I really like the amount of resources they're pouring into this group. It was one of the worst in the league last year, and I don't think that'll be the case this year. They ranked 21st for pass protection here. We're going to focus on these guys as pass blockers for now. Then we'll transition into the run game, and we'll talk about them again as run blockers. But Andrew Thomas, wholly ascending, year 3 player. Honestly, an underrated player at this point in time. It's such a example of how much a guy's rookie season changes the narrative on a player. Andrew Thomas needed some work coming out, and he was my number 1 offensive tackle, but I said his footwork was not good at Georgia. For whatever reason, the way that they coach these guys, they didn't do traditional pass sets, and he needed some time, and he got that time, and he worked at it. In year 2, he was up there with Tristan Wirfs, at least from a pass protection standpoint. At least when you talk about that really good tackle class, he was right there. Maybe not quite on Tristan Wirfs' level, but man, he is a franchise left tackle and an underrated one at that. So he's one of the biggest pieces of optimism that came out of last season. Not one of, he was like the only piece of optimism, frankly, that came out of last season. So you feel really great about him at left tackle, honestly, and you think he's going to only get better as well. The left guard center pieces are the big question marks here. Let's revisit that because you signed Mark Lewinsky at right guard. Sound pass protector, a little bit better moving forward, mauling dudes in the run game, but I feel pretty solid about what he's going to give you at right guard. Good signing. And then Evan Neal, the rookie out of Alabama, to me, he was the best player in this draft class, just straight up. I understood the hype on Ikem Ekwonu. I liked Ikem. He was, I think, my third best player in the draft, but I just think Evan Neal, from a pass protection standpoint, was so much more advanced than Ekwonu. Not perfect with his hands, but it's a pretty nitpicky thing. I thought he was about as good as they come for a tackle prospect. He's an athletic freak. And maybe the fact that we didn't see all of the testing stuff from him just limited the hype a little bit. But I think they got the best tackle in this class with the 7th pick. And he's going to plug right in at right tackle. And let's just say it this way. If offensive linemen were considered for rookie of the year, he should be one of the favorites, but they just don't get considered. I think he will be the best offensive rookie in the NFL this season. So outside of maybe Breece Hall, there's not much higher praise you can give a guy than that. I love this draft pick. You can revisit my draft grades video if you want to see a little bit more on Evan Neal. But then, as I mentioned, the left guard center combination is going to drag this thing down. I like the John Feliciano signing. Really tough guy that's kind of fought and earned reps in Buffalo after not really working in Miami. Much better run blocker, which we'll talk about, but just, very replacement level pass protector, slower feet, not the strongest guy. He will get beat. And then you have Nick Gates coming back from injury last year, went down, I think, week 2. They go to Billy Price, and he was trending up. Another guy that's just a more physical guy in the run game than he is a technician as a pass protector. So if Gates can get back from what was a pretty rough injury, I do think he wins that starting center spot, but Feliciano's got center flexibility. And then you look at the depth and the 3rd round and ask, can a Josh Iswedu win one of those jobs? Guy out of North Carolina with really quick feet. I actually thought Iswedu looked better at tackle than he did at guard. So if he can hit the weight room and really earn a spot on this offensive line on the interior, you'd be really excited about that. Can you get maybe a Shane Lemieux or a Ben Bredesen in year 3, year 4 to maybe surprise and earn one of those jobs? You do have Max Garcia, who's like a Band-Aid guard as well. But you don't have a lot of great options outside of Iswedu maybe earning that opportunity as a 3rd-round pick. It certainly could happen, but right now I look at Feliciano and Nick Gates as probably your best options at center and guard. You also have to mention Matt Parrott as a tackle depth. He's just really a lighter guy, not the most physically tenacious, and a taller dude, someone that I really don't think can play guard. So, I mean, technically your best offensive line would probably be Evan Neal at left guard and Matt Parrott at right tackle, but I wouldn't do that. You want to see Neal and Thomas turn into what could be someday the best tackle duo in the NFL. So I wouldn't want to mess with that. So 21st for pass blocking, which is a massive boost from where they've been over the last couple years. This is a much improved offensive line, and a round of applause for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll for overhauling this group in such short time. Still a lot of room to go, but you're happy with the progress they've made, and you hope it shows up on the field. So they actually ranked 23rd for me for passing game, probably a little bit higher than some expected them to come in before we got into this thing, but maybe a little bit more optimism than expected on Daniel Jones and the growth he could show. The weapons, probably not a big surprise there at 25th, unless you're really optimistic about Golladay and Shepard staying healthy, or Kadarius Toney getting back on the field for this team. Just too many question marks there, despite some talent in that room. But yeah, the pass blocking looks good. Pass game coaching helps this group out a lot as well. So I think they'll be a better looking offense than obviously last year, but maybe a little bit better than expected. But let's get into the run game here that I'm not quite as optimistic about. And again, that pains me to say because I love Saquon Barkley, the highest graded prospect I've ever assigned a grade to. But I do think he's been beaten down. I think he's like the running back version of when you ruin a quarterback and just ruin all of his confidence and you screw up how they're able to read a defense. I think they've done that to Saquon Barkley. His vision wasn't great coming out of Penn State, but he has such a lack of trust in the run blocking at this point that I don't even think he can see a lane. So you've got two major issues with him. Still, the physical talent will like shine through maybe 1 or 2 carries a game. And when it does, like, it's still explosive. It's not, again, quite 100% of what it used to be, but I'm just not very optimistic at this point in time that Saquon is going to be back. And it's so sad. Like, I want it to happen as much as anybody, but I got to be a realist here, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Matt Breida's an explosive, speedy backup that also can't stay healthy. You are really rolling the dice from a health perspective with almost this entire offensive line. This entire offense other than the offensive line. Yeah, 2 running backs that you don't even know if are going to be healthy. Then you got Gary Brightwell, just kind of a bruiser out of Arizona. Antonio Williams is someone to keep an eye on. Got 1 start for Buffalo like 2 years ago and crushed it. So Brian Daboll maybe wants to see him get an extended opportunity here. They add a big-bodied power back out of Florida State and Jashawn Corbin, but they do rank 22nd, just still holding on to maybe a glimpse of hope of what Saquon could be and what he is when he is healthy, but it's not a super optimistic projection for this running back room. Let's revisit that offensive line and talk about the run blocking in front of those running backs. So I think the right side looks pretty good. Glowinski's been a mauler for the Colts. I think Evan Neal is just going to be a natural people mover at the next level. I think they're better at center and left guard from a run blocking perspective than they are as pass blockers. I think Nick Gates can actually move some people up front. I think he's tough and fits well with what John Feliciano is just stylistically. Like, these guys have that dickhead mentality you like to see from offensive linemen in the run game. So you could do worse there. And then Andrew Thomas is, I just think, a really natural athlete in pass protection, and he's really natural in space as a move blocker in the run game, but he's not the strongest guy in the world, especially in the run game. So I would say he's just a better pass protector than a run blocker, but I still think he's a good run blocker and maybe even underrated there. So if you can get Gates back healthy, I think it's a fine run blocking unit from the offensive line. If you can't, you're turning probably to Josh Ezeudu, third round guy, who I do think has potential as a both pass protector and a run blocker, third round pick. So it's just up in the air, obviously. Ben Bredesen has actually been a good pile driver in a power run game in the past, but pass protection, you just don't really want him on the field. God, Shane Lemieux is just terrible. It's amazing the amount of playing time that he's gotten here. They also drafted Marcus McKeithen in, the 5th round, also out of North Carolina. More of your classic, like just gigantic people mover up front with really plodding foot speed, but a good anchor in pass protection. We didn't really mention him, but you technically got to keep an eye on him, but I didn't see a whole lot there to warrant any excitement there. I haven't even really mentioned the tackle depth, but Gano, Cunningham, it's just, there's not a lot of good depth here in New York. It's really just Josh Ezeudu on the inside and Matt Peart at tackle that you're even remotely interested in at this point as far as the depth goes. So pretty important that they can get Gates back, but you also have to factor in the skill players, as I do. And, you got Galladay, you got Shepard. If healthy, those are solid run blocking receivers. But you look at Darius Slayton, doesn't seem to give a damn as a run blocker. Kadarius Toney definitely doesn't. Has never been a good run blocker going back to Florida. These tight ends especially hurt this group. Jordan Akins, an undersized guy with bad run blocking technique. Ricky Seals-Jones, a converted receiver that still hasn't figured it out at his age. If Daniel Bellinger starts, he's probably your best run blocking tight end. Played in that super run heavy offense at San Diego State, but he's a rookie. So the tight ends, it's important that these guys are able to block defensive ends and climb and double team and all that stuff, that they are an extension of the offensive line, and they don't have very good ones there. You also have a rookie fullback in Jeremiah Hall. They did use Reggie Gilliam, I believe is the name of the guy in Buffalo, so we should see some Jeremiah Hall out there. Half running back, half fullback, interesting athletic type, but I wouldn't expect him to be a great lead blocker or anything. We primarily look at the offensive line here. It's why it's still a pretty decent run blocking group, but you do have to note that you're going to be getting some pressure from the perimeter of the defense, because these guys just aren't the best run blockers from a skill position perspective. It's something that they're going to have to really coach into these guys and develop a culture of run blocking on the perimeter that has not been here in recent memory. They do get a little bit of a multiplier from Daniel Jones, 1%, which is actually tied for 12th as far as that little QB run multiplier that boosts the whole run game. He's a good read option quarterback. He really is. He accelerates quickly and has some speed to the corner, deceptive speed, if you will. Then he can outrun some linebackers. He has that legendary run where he tripped and stumbled over after hitting a top speed of 22 miles an hour or something crazy. So it's not a joke. He is a read option threat that I do think they'll use. They use Josh Allen. They won't be running QB power with Daniel Jones like they did with Josh Allen, but I do think they'll run some read options with him, and he'll add some numbers advantages at times. But you pair all that with a coaching staff that, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot to prove as far as run game coordination, and it just doesn't pump out a very good run game. This is a team that struggled to run the ball, and I think the focus will be on the pass game here, and they could still very well struggle to run the ball this season. But they do rank 24th for overall offense, which again, I think is a little bit higher than some may have expected. I think they will have a functional NFL offense this year, which is a lot more than you could have said about them last year. But now let's flip over and talk about the defense. And look, it's a really young defense. I like that they're giving these guys runway, and they're going to learn a lot about who the core players for this regime are going to be, but there's going to be some learning curves as well. So let's start with the pass rush, and it all makes sense, right? You've got a lot of potential with this group, with Ojulari, a second-round pick last year, Kayvon Thibodeau, again, someone I thought should have been the number 1 overall pick. They get him with the 5th pick. Dexter Lawrence, your big, thumping interior defensive tackle, and Leonard Williams, more of that guy. He's like a 3-tech, 4-eye type. It's a group that makes a ton of sense, and you can really picture these guys working out together. And they rank 21st coming into the year. I will be surprised if they don't end higher than that. But on an individual basis, you've got Azeez Ojulari, who had a productive rookie season, someone that I did think could have been a first-round pick. They get him in the 2nd round last year and had some really good flashes, and beyond that was just a relatively consistent, solid number 2 pass rusher. So you expect that week 1, and if he can continue to refine that pass rush tool belt, continue to grow his body and develop an even more consistent aspect of power, he could become a really good number 2 rusher opposite of Kayvon Thibodeau, who has that alpha dog potential. Just physically speaking, reminds me so much of Khalil Mack. Insane first step, great length, ability to long arm, bull rush, and dominate a rep. What you'd love to see from him is him to continue to refine his pass rush plan, add more and more counter moves to the mix so that offensive linemen aren't just expecting, either basically a speed rush or power rush. But he has that threat of speed and bend around the edge, and he has that threat of power. So that's a great baseline that will make him an effective pass rusher day 1. And I do think he's only going to get better as his career goes on. I think the off the field narrative of him not caring so much about football and all this stuff, I think it was just nonsense. And I think NFL teams really overthought this one. And I can't picture a better opportunity for him to build his brand and prove people wrong than to come here for the New York Giants under Wink Martindale, who's going to ask him to just push the pocket and be that physical presence, stunt him up. I'm really optimistic about Kayvon Thibodeau, and I'm stoked that they got him. But both these guys are younger, and I just can't rank them too high coming into the year. But so much potential between those two guys. You get to Leonard Williams as your kind of, hybrid end, if you will. 3-tech, 4-eye. Definitely going to work really well on stunts with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, guys with just quickness and size and power, kind of a dream personnel for Wink Martindale as far as how he likes to scheme up these pressures. But Williams he's a very capable kind of low end number 1 interior rusher in my opinion. Had that big 2020 season, gets the big contract extension, kind of returns back more to what he's been prior to that last season, as someone that, got traded for a 3rd round pick, not someone that's a consistently dominant presence on the inside, but still a good interior rusher that's just a little bit overpaid right now. Dexter Lawrence actually was more efficient as a pass rusher last season than Leonard Williams. We'll see if that sustains or not. But Lawrence last year was actually the opposite of what you thought he'd be coming out. Kind of surprising a little bit. Showing a ton of quickness and ability to rush the passer last year was, really trending up. But from a run defense perspective, he actually took a step backwards and didn't play with as much play strength up front. So kind of an interesting year for Dexter Lawrence. They did pick up his 5th-year option, so he'll have one more year next year here. But I see a ton of potential here. He's only 24 years old. Kind of actually reminds me a little bit of Kenny Clark's career trajectory, and maybe it's just because he wears 97, but from a size perspective, from the fact that he's actually a little bit better as a pass rusher than a run defender than you might think, that's scary. If he becomes Kenny Clark, which I do think is possible with Kayvon Thibodeau and these guys around him, this pass rush has top 10 upside by the end of this year if he hits. Well, I shouldn't say if he hits. He's hit. He's a good player. But if he continues to grow and just really becomes a dominant player. It doesn't always happen in year 4 for guys, but it's in the realm of possibilities. So an ocean of potential up front here and a good pass rush right away. They rank 21st there, and I don't see them being much lower than that. From a depth perspective, honestly, the interior group, no one even worth mentioning from a pass rush perspective, other than maybe Chris Hinton, who was a true junior out of Michigan, a former 5-star prospect. I do expect he makes this team. Was an excellent undrafted pickup. I thought he was for sure worth a 5th, 6th round pick in a really weak defensive line class. You can see the traits there with Christopher Hinton, just needs to be coached up. So keep an eye on him to honestly be the third best interior rusher here. Really has no idea what he's doing when it comes to rushing the passer. His development at Michigan was really underwhelming, but the traits are there. And then on the edge, you have a lot of depth here, guys that will rotate and contribute at a depth level, but no one else with like starting potential in this group. You got Quincy Roche, who I should say can be similar to what Tyus Bowser was for the Ravens, as a guy that does play a good amount of snaps, talking 300, 400, 500 snaps, plays on early downs, buys opportunities for Thibodeau and Ojulari to get healthy, guy with quickness against the run, versatility to drop into coverage from a 3-4 base end assignment or a base outside linebacker assignment, and can bend and contribute as a pass rusher as well. So he could definitely play that role. I like Quincy Roche. They kind of stole him from the Steelers. Don't know why they didn't have him make the team, because I was a little lower on him coming out, but as a 6th round guy and for the Giants an undrafted pickup, it's a good little move by Dave Gettleman before he left. Jihad Ward, who's been in this Ravens pocket pushing pass rush system for years, will probably make the team and be a backup to guys like Thibodeau. O'Shane Zimenez, big year for him to prove that he's worth it. Ellerson Smith, athletic guy at UNI. We'll see what he can bring in year 2. 4th round pick last year, so you can't give up on him quite yet. See if he can adjust to the NFL here in year 2. Jalen Holmes had a good year for the Saints last year as an early down run defender as well, putting his hand in the dirt, playing a little bit more like 5 tech for the Saints. So he might be more of a base end for the Giants, but traditionally an edge player there. So it's a deep group of edge guys, but it's really all about Ojulari and Thibodeau establishing themselves as a ascending young edge rush duo. And man, you've got a young high upside edge rush duo and a young high upside tackle duo. Like, that is the freaking foundation of a potential rebuild here for the Giants to get excited about. But then you get into the coverage unit, and it's horrible, at least right now. It's another really young group, though, that will be fun to see if these guys can ascend. Let's just start with the secondary, because that's where the excitement is. You've got Adoree Jackson as your number 1 corner. He's going to be here for at least another 2 years. Played really well last year and should be very comfortable as your number 1 corner. He's not the problem. I like Adoree Jackson. But your other 2 corners right now are Aaron Robinson, a 3rd round pick last year, who's played his best cornerback from the slot, and Darnay Holmes, whose size, especially in this system, basically forces him into the slot. So 2 young players, Darnay Holmes, another 3rd round pick in 2020, a 4th round pick actually. I like these 2 players. I can see a path for these guys to ascend to being, a good number 2 corner from Aaron Robinson. I definitely like Darnay Holmes' upside as a slot corner, and he's shown some really good flashes there. But 2 guys that are entirely unproven, and you just can't rank them too high coming into the year. So an important year for those guys to show what they can do. You got to keep an eye on Jaron Williams, who earned a lot of playing time last season and frankly was one of this team's better corners. So someone that will be on this team's radar. I would think they go to the better athletes, guys like Robinson and Darnay Holmes, but Williams probably played the best of the 3 last season. They draft Cordell Flott in the 3rd round, already being known as Cordell Slot, as he played in the slot at LSU. Someone that, showed really good zone instincts, a little bit of a, kind of underdeveloped true junior coming out. A bit of a surprise to see him go in the 3rd round, NFL really valuing that youth and the experience playing at LSU, but his tape was far from bad. I think he also could potentially put on 5-10 pounds and play outside corner. I don't think we see a ton of him this year unless he surprises and beats out Darnay Holmes, but definitely an interesting young piece to have as a fourth or a fifth corner there with a lot of positional flexibility. And then you're probably getting Rodarius Williams and Maurice Kennedy duking it out for the sixth corner spot. I really like Rodarius Williams' zone instincts at Oklahoma State, but in a system here with Wink Martindale that's going to lean more towards press man coverage, he might be the odd man out, with Maurice Kennedy being, a good run defender, a good special teamer, and more slot depth there. But then your safety group, another interesting unit. You have Xavier McKinney, an ascending star safety. Did he make the Pro Bowl last year? Forgive me, Giants fans, I don't remember. I remember thinking about him for my all-pro teams that I was putting together on this channel. The guy had, 5-6 interceptions last year, really showed a ton of juice as a coverage player, secure tackler, more of that free safety type, and that's what he'll play in this defense. That's going to be a lot of cover one, a lot of cover three, where he'll be that high free safety where he's very comfortable. He's got ball hawking instincts, someone that is ascending towards that top 10 safety in the NFL range. You could make a case that he's already there. So you really like what you have in Xavier McKinney. But next to him, Julian Love, fourth round pick, Dane Belton, athletic guy out of Iowa, Henry Black, who they picked up from Green Bay. You got Yusuf Corker, who I actually had a fifth round grade on. I think that was another excellent undrafted pickup. It's really not anything you can basically expect much from right away. Like, you've got youth, you've got some intriguing pieces there, but none of these guys you can count on as a reliable number two safety. So it's kind of a project defense at this point in time. So much potential, so much youth, but so rarely do these guys all hit right away. Like, you're gonna probably expect some learning curves, and that's why they rank 31st. Like, you have 3 out of 5 players here are potential liabilities, and that it doesn't matter how good Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney are at that point. Like, these guys could get picked on very easily. So they're gonna rank low coming into the year with a lot of potential to ascend above that. And then the linebackers, I'm kind of a known Blake Martinez hater. I had to apologize in 2020 because he really did, to me, there was all this talk about him improving his diet and getting faster, and I laughed at it, but it really did show up. Like, he was moving faster, still not some great cover linebacker or anything, but the zone feel is definitely there, and he's instinctive enough. He can get in the way of some passes now. Like, he's a functional cover linebacker, but he to me in Green Bay was one of the biggest liabilities of any defensive player in the NFL, and there's still a little bit of that in him, but you gotta applaud the development there, the commitment to his diet and getting in better shape. So he'll be back. He'll be the captain of this defense. Not the liability I once thought he was. So a functional linebacker there. But next to him, it's the worst LB2 group in the league, and I don't think it's remotely close. Tay Crowder has now started for 2 seasons, hasn't shown an ounce of development, and is consistently a problem. He's always out of position. He misses tackles. Although he improved his tackling last year, it's still not consistent. I don't really get what they've seen in him, and we'll see if this new coaching staff values what he brings to the table over, say, Micah McFadden, who I think was a really good blitzing linebacker coming out of Indiana, and that's Blake Martinez's biggest weakness, is he is a horrible blitzer, and I think in a team that wants to run a lot of cover one and blitz that middle linebacker a lot of times, I think they might like Micah McFadden over Tay Crowder. So I guess monitor that. McFadden did not show a lot of coverage instincts, though, so who knows if they'll go to him. Carter Coughlin, same deal. Quite literally was an edge rusher at Minnesota, but could potentially be a lethal blitzer for that reason. Actually stepped in and played okay as an off-ball linebacker, someone that's converted because he is undersized for an edge. So those 2 guys will definitely push Tay Crowder, along with Darian Beavers. They draft Beavers out of Cincinnati in the 6th round here. What I would say about Darian Beavers is think Anthony Barr if he wasn't a great athlete. Like, he's Big dude, 6'4", 250 pounds, played a lot of edge for Cincinnati, and theoretically should be a good run defender, but doesn't always play as physical, and is not a very natural mover in space dropping into coverage, but a little more fluid as well than you would expect for such a big guy. I think he's quite a ways away from earning a starting job here, but technically the path is pretty clear for him, as the guys ahead of him aren't any good either. So I guess keep an eye on all 4 of those at the LB2 position. Wouldn't say quite as much about Cam Brown, who's more of an edge hybrid guy, more built for the previous regime. TJ Brunson, Hilliard, again, pretty good opportunity for someone to ascend here, but I don't think those guys are very talented in their own right. So they rank 30th for linebacker coverage. It's much more about the guys after Blake Martinez, but I also don't think Martinez is such a star cover linebacker that he's going to make up for that lack of talent next to him. So this is one of the more problematic coverage units heading into the league that we'll see, ranking 31st for DB coverage and 30th for linebacker coverage, which of course is going to drag down the pass defense, ranking 27th. Now you see all the youth, you see all the upside. You can picture this becoming a top 20 defense by the end of the year, and these pieces really starting to make sense together. But they got to prove that, right? I'm not going to rank them at their ceiling coming into the year when they haven't proved anything. So 27th right now for pass defense. And then lastly, the run defense, where ironically they also rank 27th. Starting up front, this is where you can start to talk about some of that nose tackle depth with Justin Ellis, who's just a veteran guy that's been doing it forever, but not quite what he used to be. So just a functional kind of replacement level nose tackle there. DJ Davidson was a good run defender coming out of Arizona State. Far from perfect, but I think will be a capable 4th guy to have there, along with Moa and Chris Hinton, who we talked about, was a really just natural block shedder. That was what I liked about him, is when he did engage and had proper technique, you could really see the natural strength there. So those 3 depth pieces will probably make the team. And then, of course, you have Dexter Lawrence, who has actually played a lot more like 3-tech than he has nose tackle here, which is funny because he's such a big dude. And I actually kind of expect that to continue when you look at Justin Ellis being a better base nose along with DJ Davidson. And it's not just where he's played, it's how he's played. He actually has not held up as well against the run as you may have expected. I think he did it actually better earlier on in his career. But I do think we're seeing a little bit of an evolution in Dexter Lawrence's game towards being more of this pass rushing guy. Still a very functional defender against the run, do not get me wrong. But it's certainly possible that he's, being recognized for his ability to actually rush the passer. Guy had 43 pressures last season, was towards the top for interior rushers, and could be someone that they're saying, you know what, or at least he's internally I don't need to go 5,000 miles per hour against the run every single play because I need to save some of that gas for pass rushing downs. I think that's certainly a reasonable take, and I'm fine with that. I'd rather you be a better pass rusher than a run defender. So you're getting a trade-off there. He was not as impressive against the run when I was watching this team back as, frankly, I expected to see from such a guy that was so dominant at Clemson as a run defender, but he has not been that guy in the NFL. He's solid, but not elite as a run defender. Far from it. Leonard Williams, similar deal. Kind of a hybrid defensive end. He's going to play exactly what they asked Calais Campbell to do for the Ravens last year. And that's a tough ask for a guy that is a little bit, I don't want to say weaker, but not as much play strength on the interior for Leonard Williams. He's got length, he's got quickness to shed blocks, he's instinctive against the run, far from a liability, but not some impassable wall up front as a 3-4 defensive end. And then you've got the young guys. Ojulari is on the lighter side. He will get moved, but he's got instincts and quickness, similar to a lot of these Georgia edge guys like Leonard Floyd and the guy they left, the guy they let go to Atlanta. His name's escaping me right now, but just quick, lengthy guys that can contain the edge basically, but not a force in the run. Kayvon Thibodeau can be a force. Just a rookie, so not going to rank too high coming into the year, but with his physical capabilities to dominate tackles and tight ends especially, he can ascend to being that sort of Jadeveon Clowney, presence on the edge as far as being a real physical presence. So definitely some upside there with him. We already talked a little bit about Roche and the role he's going to play as an early down guy. He's capable. He'll get in the mix there. Along with Jalen Holmes, if he makes this team, actually was a pretty good run defender for the Saints last year. Zimenez, Ward. It's solid depth as run defenders on the edge. They rank 20th for D-line run defense. So respectable. The linebacker run defense. Martinez is a good run defender, but the sideline to sideline speed is closer to a liability than a strength for him. He does tend to let things come to him a little bit more, but just not a lot of stuff gets past him either. Super secure tackler, incredible discipline, like doesn't lose his gap. So a good run defender there. And then the linebacker group, like everything we said about those guys as cover players and being completely unproven and not even very good players at all, applies as run defenders, especially Tay Crowder, who is just light and undisciplined and misses tackles and gets moved around way too easily up front. Again, I do not understand why Tay Crowder has played as much, and you just hope that one of these guys can step up. And Darian Beavers, I suppose, would be the guy. Him and Micah McFadden have the size to potentially be good run defenders, but day 3 picks, you're not expecting that from them as rookies especially. And then they actually rank dead last for defensive back run defense. With Darnay Holmes in the slot, he's one of the more just lighter, true cover slots in the league. He just does not have the power to get off blocks and isn't the most instinctive run defender. He can make some splash plays and his efforts is there, but he is not a strength from the slot. You talk about Julian Love playing more strong safety here. You know, he's more corner than safety. He's kind of in that hybrid safety projection. So that's the bulk of the DB run defense is going to be your strong safety and slot corner. And I think they have 2 of the worst run defenders in the league at those positions, at least as starters. Aaron Robinson is very physical. He'll contain the edge, but Adoree Jackson will not. So again, ranking dead last for DB run defense. If you get Jaron Williams out there, it'll help a little bit. Maurice Kennedy, you don't want him to see him out there because it means these young guys aren't stepping up. But he has been a very good, run defending dime back, if you will, or slot corner. And then, of course, Xavier McKinney playing way up top as the free safety. It's just hard to make an impact as a run defender up there. But he'll come down and be a secure tackler. Good pursuit speed and prevents big runs, but not like some guy that's up front stunting runs, getting off blocks against tight ends and tackles, right? Like he's more of a cover safety. So they do rank dead last for defensive back run defense. So just kind of those like between the margins things with the defensive back run defense, and then again with the skill blocking from your receivers and tight ends. That's some of the stuff that this team's going to have to clean up that makes a bigger impact than I think a lot of people realize. So they do rank 27th for run defense. Your defensive line's going to help because they do rank 20th there. But behind it, it's not a strength at all. So no surprise with ranking 27th for pass defense and 27th for run defense that they're going to rank 27th for overall defense. So much potential with this group. It's going to be a fun team just to see these guys play and see who develops, see who steps up. They really have, you can picture all these guys. They got to figure out their linebacker room, but other than that, you can picture these guys working together and growing together and in a year or two having the foundations of a top 15, top 10 defense, but they just have so much to prove before we get there. So 24th on offense, 27th on defense, and 29th on special teams. They did really struggle there last year. That's another area that's between the margins that this new regime, they're just going to have to clean it up. So that's going to crank out the 27th overall ranking for these New York Giants. We are going to wrap up on the solo end here with the schedule and their Vegas over-under prediction before we bring Bengal in here for our interview. But a surprisingly high win total for the Giants at 7.5 right now. Interesting number there. But you look at the schedule, you get to play your NFC East, you get to play the AFC South, and then they play the NFC North. So really some of the worst divisions in the league. It explains why their over-under is a bit higher, and it gives them a lot of winnable games on the schedule. I actually have them with 10 wins in that winnable quadrant and 1 as a likely win, getting the Houston Texans at home. So you can definitely see where you get to 7.5 wins, because division games are always weird, and you get to play the Bears and the Lions and the Jags and the Washington twice, the Eagles twice, the Panthers at home. One of their hardest games was supposed to be at Lambeau. They get to play them in London, which might be a travel advantage for them. So you can definitely look at the schedule and explain the 7.5 wins. I still think they go under. Like, I can't picture this team winning 8 games. You really would need that defense to accelerate their trajectory with all of the youth there. And for a lot of these guys to hit, I think for that to happen, you would really need the receiving core to stay healthy and, for Saquon to get back to speed. You just need a lot of things to happen, even if the schedule is easy. And just knowing the NFL, that usually everything doesn't come together like that. Sometimes it does, and when it does, it's hella awesome. And then, of course, you need Daniel Jones to play good football on top of all of that. So, upside's there, but I wouldn't go betting on this team to win 8 games next year. I think there's better things to, save your money for gas and all that stuff. Paying $5 a gallon right now. Jesus. But we are going to transition to our interview with Bengal. Thank you to Bengal for taking the time to come on. He's got a great YouTube channel doing draft content, Madden content, NFL analysis. He's a Giants fan himself, despite the username there. So we're going to transition to the interview. And now I'm thrilled to welcome in another great YouTube NFL mind here, Bengal. If you couldn't tell by the memorabilia behind him, just a little bit of a New York guy. So how's it going, man? Excited to talk some Giants. Thanks for coming on for a little bit here.
No, that's high praise. I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to join you. When you shot me the DM about it, I'm like, yeah, let's get it done. Let's do it. Talking Giants hasn't been great lately, but here's to taking a couple steps forward every year and not backward like it's been.
I know. As I said in the intro, it's like it feels like it was just yesterday I was doing them like 30th in my power rankings, talking about Joe Judge and the new regime. And it's like, well, here we go again. But I mean, Dable to me is the best.
Way better.
Dude, I think he's easily the best candidate the last 2 years, if not like the last 5, just like in all of the head coach candidates. Like, dude's worked with Belichick, Saban, what he did with Josh Allen. Doesn't get a whole lot better.
Yeah, I mean, some people, like, I think if you really want to take a look at the Josh Allen situation, because some people are trying to compare that to what Daniel Jones could be. I'm like, it's not the same. It's like, because Josh Allen, way more physical tools, obviously. But with Jordan Palmer, he completely reworked his mechanics. And that's what people don't understand. Like, well, he's just developing. It's like, it isn't as easy as that, because, you and I both do a lot of draft coverage, and it's so tough with the quarterback sometimes, because you say, oh, this guy can't play, but he's a great athlete, great arm. It's impossible to know how these guys are going to develop. It's completely insane with some of these guys lately.
Yeah. So let's talk a little more about Daniel Jones. So they declined the 5th-year option, and I think we both, you correct me if I'm wrong, but we probably both agreed big reach when it happened, and probably the right decision to decline the option just because it's been so up and down. But at the same time, I also like watching this team back a little bit. Complete nightmare last year. You look at what the team looked like when he came out. It was like, it's not a viable offense. And he was somewhat functional. I think his year 2, he actually showed some pretty solid growth. Basically what I'm saying is a lot of people lump him with Darnold and Drew Lock and these quarterbacks that like, oh, it's over, don't, and rightfully so. But I still think maybe there's a little bit of hope with Daniel Jones to at least become that Kirk Cousins-ish quarterback. And I'm curious if that's kind of where you're at with him, or if you're just, nah, we're done. Like, can't wait to see who we draft next year.
The thing is, like, I can see it, right? Because there are things to like. He's, sneaky athletic, but he really is a very solid athlete. And the arm, while not spectacular, is, I would say, average to above average. It's not a noodle or anything like that. But my main concern with him is something that I haven't really seen much improvement on, and it's that he just has no ability to sense pressure whatsoever. And even though the Giants' offensive line has improved, it's not great. It really is. And even though Evan Neal's this great offensive tackle prospect, you and I both know that that's a tough position to come in and be so effective year one. Like Tristan Wirfs kind of is the last one that comes to mind, but that's few and far between. Well, I guess Rashawn Slater too last year, but that's a little bit few and far between. That doesn't happen all the time. So is his ability in the pocket going to take steps up or won't? And that's going to be, I think, what really defines his success or failure, because he's shown, in my opinion, like no real improvement in that area. And that is a really big problem. If you're an NFL quarterback and you can't recognize pressure, step up in the pocket and make throws, it's going to be a nightmare scenario for any offense. So yeah, he hasn't had the help around him. The offensive line's been terrible, but it's anyone's guess as to whether he's going to improve in that regard or not. That's a tough thing to improve on.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. That is the thing with him. And it's on the bright side, at least when he's not sensing pressure, he's not putting the ball on the ground every single other play. Like I had
fumble a lot though.
Yeah, but at least it's like in the first year, I had like a running meme joke, like, and this week's Daniel Jones fumble brought to you by this pass rusher. It feels like it's at least, improved a little bit perhaps, but do you think it's possible that he plays a little bit better? He plays like maybe a slightly improved version of 2020 Daniel Jones. Maybe he's looking at, 18th, 19th best quarterback in the league, and they work out a deal where it's not this, the next quarterback up always gets 40 plus mil these days. Do you think it's possible maybe he signs 3 years, 80 mil, and he's a functional NFL quarterback, and it's one of these situations like the Vikings have had where they kind of try to put the best situation around him with a more manageable contract?
I mean, it certainly is possible. 3 years, 80 mil would be a little rich for me, just because, he is a replacement level quarterback. But yeah, could he take a step up? He's got to learn the new offense. So there could be a learning curve there. But he should be in a better position to succeed. There is talent around him now. And it's tough because on paper, you look at the Giants receiving core and you go, that really doesn't look that bad. Kenny Galladay is a jump ball receiver. He's not ever going to be a separator, but if you get him red zone opportunities, you could see good things.
Maybe one touchdown this year would be nice.
Jeez. It was a disaster. But Kadarius Toney, when healthy, is good. I really didn't mind the pick at the time, especially because you traded down and got an extra first-round pick, which was used on Evan Neal, I want to say. Or maybe it was used on Thibodeau. Either way, right? Extra first-round pick. I'm very fine with that. And Toney's a good player. Just got to stay healthy. I mean, he ripped off nearly 200 yards against the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. And you got Wan'Dale Robinson, who, a little bit of a reach, but I think is a good player. And Sterling Shepard, when healthy, which is a rarity, is a good player, nothing special. It's like they have decent talent there. They should be able to figure out ways to get those guys involved and find the end zone at least once. We'll see.
Yeah. Yep. I'm just... it sounds like you're where I would be if I were in your shoes. Like, you kind of want him to fail and just get another quarterback.
In a way, but of course you never want to root against your team.
Yeah,
as tempting as it's been. Tank for Tua, that would have been sweet. Oh, Tua.
It's working out great for Miami.
That offense should be something special this year. They're going to run the ball so much.
I'm really looking forward to dealing with the Tua fans when we get to the Dolphins deep dive.
They're going to be a nightmare. I've seen them on Twitter.
So what do you know about the Kadarius Toney situation? I'm going to be honest. I didn't really do a whole lot of research before I prepped for this. So a couple weeks ago, well, in the Kadarius Toney department, I didn't, dig through all the, rumors and all that. I usually just, in situations like that, I like to just wait till it happens and not speculate too much. But it sounds like you expect him back and good to go at this point, and the kind of trade rumors he's going to be off the team type is in the past.
Yeah, it seems like the team definitely values him, and new general manager Joe Shane was only interested in trading him if the right offer presented itself. It's like, hey, I'm the new GM. I'm going to look at everybody from the previous regime, and everyone's potentially available. I don't think anyone would have been off limits at all. Like if a team wanted to make a move for James Bradbury, they would have if the Giants had any leverage, or Leonard Williams, but that's a pretty much immovable contract. But yeah, I think that was just, doing due diligence as a new GM. I think Tony's probably a part of the plan. And I thought when they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson, I go, oh, the rumors are true. Tony's going to be gone. But they came out and said, no, we have a plan in place. Why not have two of those guys on the field that are those gadget type guys? And Tony, I think, is a little bit more than a gadget. So, yeah, I think he's a part of the plan on offense. He's a really talented young player. And if he can stay healthy and focus less about his rapping career, I think maybe you have something there.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's definitely good to know. I guess I hadn't fully looked into that, but I also want to ask you about Saquon, and I'm kind of throwing all these, difficult fandom questions at you because everybody wants to see Saquon get back to, yes, my God, yes. And I love Saquon myself. I have a different version of that, like framed on the other side of my desk here. So I would love to see Saquon get back. But last year for me, it really felt like, God, this guy seems to be a more shell of himself. And I'm curious, in your shoes, are you optimistic for him to get back to speed, or where are you at with Saquon?
I don't even know if we can call it inconsistency, but his real problem was not just that the Giants offensive line was bad. It's that he doesn't have NFL caliber vision as a running back. And that's a real problem. He's a special talent, but as we saw, if he's injured and banged up and he's not able to be that special, generational type athlete, which is, I hate generational. I really do. But with Saquon, I think it fits because you don't really see somebody like that with the height, weight, or not even height, but weight, speed freak who can catch, who can do all of these different things. Saquon really was a special talent. And if there was any running back worth spending a top pick on, it would be him. But yeah, not worth the second round pick or number 2 overall pick, I should say. I think he is still a special talent, but if you don't have that ability, that burst, it's going to be tough because he doesn't have the vision. He can't really run in between the tackles the way an NFL back is really supposed to. So we'll wait and see how healthy he is. If there's anyone that's going to be able to rehab and get back to where he was, I think it is going to be Saquon. But there's just so many question marks with the Giants, and he is a big one. I really don't know. I really don't know, but I hope so, obviously.
Do you think there was a loss of juice from what we saw from him last year?
Sometimes you don't know if it's that or if he's just being a little bit more hesitant, not, really wanting to get hurt. But, he was banged up consistently. And I think it was kind of one of those situations where it's like the narrative was forming in New York and even elsewhere. Like, this is an injury prone guy, but his injury was like a freak injury. He stepped on somebody's leg and rolled his ankle, and then it's a high ankle sprain or whatever it was. And that's already after coming back from an ACL tear. It's like, it's just a tough spot. And, it's not on a good team. It's like, what's the motivation as well? So I think 2022 is going to be the real prove it year for Saquon. And would it shock me if he's back to being excellent? No, but you also have to recognize his inconsistencies. And, he's a guy that constantly looks to bounce it outside. And if you don't have that burst, there's going to be a real problem. But whether or not he has that burst, I don't know. I mean, it really is a question mark for 2022.
Yeah, totally agree. So I want to talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball too. Looking at this group, I mean, it's definitely a fun unit, just kind of a lot of open runways for recently drafted players, whether it's in the secondary or in that front 4. Linebacker, not so much, but who are some of the young players on this defense that you're most excited to watch this year?
I mean, the obvious one is Thibodeau and Ojulari, like that combo off the edge. The Giants really haven't had any edge presence in the past decade or so. Prime JPP, he was great, but they really were built on pass rush early on. Talk about Matthias Kiwanuka, Justin Tuck, Osi Umenyiora, Michael Strahan earlier on. It's like this team, especially with those Steve Spagnuolo defenses, was built on getting after the quarterback. And the Giants are sending out guys that, Kyler Fackrell, Marcus Golden. It's like these are some of the edge combos that we've seen recently. I'm not
Hmm.
even sure if they were on the same team, but bad players overall. Like, no offense to them. Like, NFL talent, great, but not who you want out there. But
Yeah.
now you have young guys, and Thibodeau for me was a top 2 player in the draft. I thought he was a tremendous talent, not like Myles Garrett level or Chase Young level or any of the Bosa's, but right close next level down. Loved him. So when you can get that guy at number 5, he goes number 1 overall, I think, in a lot of other years. So stoked to get him. Dexter Lawrence is good. Got to like the D line a little bit. Brought in Justin Ellis too. Leonard Williams is decent. Like, it should be an upgraded group, and especially in the Wink Martindale defense. You know he's going to be dialing up pressure and getting these guys open lanes to the QB. The secondary is the real question mark. Aaron Robinson, the UCF kind of slot corner, was injured basically all of last season. So I don't know if he's going to be able to be good, but I liked him coming out. The Giants just really don't have a boundary corner outside of Adoree Jackson, and that's a real issue because Cordell Flott is a slot corner. Darnay Holmes
Hmm.
is a slot corner. I have Aaron Robinson as a slot corner. So that's going to be a real issue. You lose James Bradbury because you need to sign your draft picks. Who is playing boundary? I don't know.
Yeah, I would expect it's Robinson, just because he's got the size to do it theoretically,
Yeah.
and he's not slow. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that defense goes. I did want to ask a little bit about Dexter Lawrence because it seemed last year, and I never want to put too much weight in the PFF grades, but I did go back and watch a few all 22 games before prepping for this, so I did do some research. But it really did kind of show to me like he was kind of his game was evolving a little bit in a different way where he did feel like a much better pass rusher. Like third downs, it felt like he was the guy that was actually kind of getting in even more than like Leonard Williams a lot of times. But as a run defender, it did actually show like he wasn't that huge presence. And that's also been kind of like Kenny Clark's career. Started on early on a little bit more of a run defender, first round pick, but really evolved as a pass rusher. Do you see that being maybe more of his game moving forward? Can he get to that kind of top 10-ish pass rushing interior guy? Is he there already? You mentioned him earlier. How do you feel about Dexter Lawrence right now?
I don't think he's there already because, I mean, you look at a guy in his same draft class like Jeffrey Simmons who is there already, but he's not the same space eater. Like, I think everyone, including myself, had Dexter Lawrence pegged as a nose tackle. And because of Dalvin Tomlinson, who has not been there in Minnesota now, but because of Dalvin Tomlinson playing nose tackle, the Giants are like, okay, this is our 3-4 defensive end rather than the space eating big, one tech or zero or whatever it is. Given the alignment, but you know, I think it's just what he's been asked to do, and he's shown that he has the knack for improving with what he's asked to do. So, if he's tasked with playing over the center, can he do that? Can he take up space? He's still like 340 pounds. Like, yeah, I think he still can do that. It's just what he's been tasked to do, and I think he is evolving, as you said, and I really do like him as a player, and that's going to be another one of those guys where, like, do the Giants look to retain him long term or go a different direction like they've done so often with those interior defensive linemen that they've drafted? Linval Joseph, Dalvin Tomlinson, different regime, of course, but it's like they just have not held on to their interior defensive linemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the last thing I wanted to bring up was going to be the draft, and you talked a little bit about it, but it kind of stays on brand here. Like the one other than Brian Dable, one thing that's really optimistic for me for the Giants is you have a potential cornerstone tackle duo with Neal and Andrew Thomas. We haven't even talked about, was awesome last year, like the only bright spot on the team last year, for God's sake. And
Xavier
then you have,
McKinney, I would say, was good too.
I guess
Back
that's
end.
true. Yep. And then, on the defensive side of the ball, you have this potentially really nice like edge duo. I think Thibodeau, totally agree. Like I thought he should have been the number one pick over Trayvon Walker, and he could be your number one with Aguilari is like kind of the ideal number two. Like those are premium building blocks for the team. So it's good to see you kind of share that optimism in those same areas. I want to end by just talking about the draft a little bit. Was Wan'Dale Robinson the worst pick of the draft?
The whole draft. Well, Quay Walker exists, right? I think it was I think it was a reach, but looking at it from an optimistic standpoint, which is what I'm going to choose to do this time around because I've been
Mm-hmm.
so pessimistic with the Giants the past several years. I think he's a good player. So usually I think the problem with okay, I don't think this guy's any good. Why did they take him this high? Maybe I
Sure.
had a 4 or 5 on him and they took him in round 2 or 3. That's a little bit too early. However, I think the player is good, and we saw him at Nebraska. He was forced to play running back and was good in that role. And he was this do-it-all guy at Kentucky. It's like he's obviously very talented, and yeah, he's small, but he's tough. So he'll hold on to the football through traffic, which is atypical of a smaller receiver. If you even want to put receiver on him, he's kind of a gadget in ways. But was it too early? Yeah, I wasn't stoked with the pick when there was so much talent on the board, in my opinion, especially at linebacker. Like, I love the linebackers on the board, and they passed on Leo Chanel and Chad Muma and Troy Anderson, and they took Wandale Robinson. I'm like, don't love that. Don't love that. But I think the
Yeah,
player's good, so I
it's
like it.
really crazy that even when a great linebacker like Quay Walker came off the board so early, that there was really good linebackers available still in the second round. Yeah, it's just crazy.
No, there were. See, I don't hate Quay as much as you seem to, just
Hmm.
because I think if you work him off the edge too, it's like he's going to have more value than you would expect. And he has the size for it. He has the athleticism for it. I think he was an edge in high school. So obviously it's a difference between playing edge in high school and being an NFL edge defender. But he has juice off the edge. So I think he could have like real value for that team. I really don't think that pick was the worst of the draft. I
Yeah.
really don't. I like
I mean,
Quay.
or you could have Jermaine Johnson or George Karlaftis off the edge.
That's
That would
also
work too.
true. But how about a guy that can do both, though? Because Quay
Yeah.
Walker can play off ball, even if
Yep.
he's not this great cover guy yet. Yet.
Mhm.
Maybe he
Yeah.
will be.
Well, I'll choose to be optimistic on Quay Walker as well. It's all in the past. Are there any other picks that you were just kind of fired up about? Maybe a day 2 or a day 3 pick that you were like, "Ooh, I kind of like that."
Yeah. I know a lot of people that I talked to were really excited about Cordell Flott, the LSU corner, viewed him as one of the more underrated DBs in the draft. And he has played on the outside, but he's probably a slot corner, and he's got decent size. He's still very young. It's like he might end up being one of those sneaky guys, but I didn't love a lot of the picks down the board. Like Dane Belton is very whatever. Uh,
Hmm.
Darian Beavers is a hyped up guy by the fans, but I don't think he's anything special. Hope he can be, but Marcus McKeithen, Josh Azudu. Azudu's probably the better of the two. Probably has the best chance to start, but the
What do
UNC
you think of his
offensive
winner?
line when I watched them was not excellent. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was wasn't
He
stoked to see
he
two of them
he was interesting to me because he played a little bit of tackle,
tackle. Yeah,
and I thought his footwork was pretty good. So yeah, he's obviously not going to play tackle here, but he was a guy that kind of came on my radar late, and I think I ended up with like a 4th or a 5th on him. And then he goes to the 3rd, and I'm like, dang, there might be something there. I'm curious to see how that left guard spot plays out.
I think he will
Who
be the starter
you
eventually.
do?
Maybe not right away. I think could still be Shane Lemieux because he's been there.
Ugh.
He's a disaster. The offensive line has been horrific, but you
Hmm.
got pieces. Signed Mark Lewinsky. I don't know if you talked about that earlier,
Hmm.
but the offensive line is looking decent. John Feliciano at center has experience starting, is not going to blow you away, but I think is decent. So it's an improved group for sure. But that left
Okay.
guard spot is the real question mark, I would say.
So I was actually projecting Nick Gates to come back at center. Is that not happening?
I mean, he had such a brutal injury, so
Okay,
that's just a big question
gotcha.
because, especially when you talk about offensive linemen with their lower half getting injured, it's like that's a big
Hmm.
problem. So don't know, but he was good at center for the Giants the past couple of years when he's played. But I
Hmm.
think it will be Feliciano. That's my expectation. But if rehab goes better than expected and he's ready to go, hey, he's someone that's been able to be good before or
Yeah,
decent at
house
least.
money. Yeah. Well, awesome, man. That's all I got for you. I really appreciate the time. And anything you got going on that you want to promote before we get out of here?
Yankees baseball going pretty well overall. Best
What are
team
we
in
doing?
baseball.
Hey, it's 3-2 now.
Yeah, it's
We're clapping back a little bit.
getting back in it. But yeah, I hope I didn't hog the mic too much. Just got a lot to say. It's the Giants, you know. It's not usually a
No,
lot to be excited about, but
yeah,
some
we brought you on
pieces.
for a reason, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there you have it. There was our Giants deep dive. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed. Drop a comment down below if you think this was too high, too low, or just right for the New York Giants. And these deep dives will be releasing every Sunday here at the same time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Sundays throughout June. I'm in Europe right now as you're watching this. So once we get back in July, we'll go pedal to the metal and start cranking these out 2 or 3 times a week. But until then, you can expect this every Sunday until July. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you for the next one. Peace out.